transcription enabled. We enabled, that is, and we will share with all of our friends and followers the video recording of this workshop on our YouTube channel, which is the Rec Innovation Lab on YouTube, as soon as tomorrow. Might take us a little longer than normal, just because we are sort of operating on a skeleton crew at the moment with some transition with staff in between semesters, but you'll see it in the next day or so, and we encourage you all to go on there and look at some of the videos from previous workshops and follow us, right, and help us to grow here at the Rec. So the Rec Innovation Lab, for those of you who don't know, we're here at Miramar, and we're an incubator, and we have a lot of amazing startups coming out of the program. And one of the amazing startups coming out of the program, you got a chance just now to see his commercial that he made to share about his idea, his startup, and his name is Aaron Guyett, and he is actually our guest speaker today. And we love hearing from him on topics such as blockchain and marketing, and he's also like me, an educator, and he has lots to share. So I'm excited about the workshop today. Aaron, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much, Tanya. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. This is, I think, my second workshop at the Rec. I did one last term, and I think I got 2 in the weeds about blockchain tech, so I'm going to take it a little bit higher level. So we'll do a little bit of a review and then dive into how it applies to startups.
Right, I know. So we expect that we have people from all levels here in our workshops. Some of you, this will be, I think, just second nature, and some of us, like me, I appreciate when you give us a little extra background and take it slow on the blockchain, and so I think no matter what, though, everyone will get something from your workshop. I know I went away from that last workshop knowing so much more than I ever thought I would know about blockchain. So yeah, all right. So we can see your slides, and I know from talking with you that you like it when people interrupt if they have questions. And so I will encourage everyone at the audience, if you do have an interjection, a question, if you need some clarification, just let us know. Turn on your camera, your microphone, and join in the conversation. Right.
Yeah, I'm going to echo that. So you can interrupt me whenever. I set aside time for these, more of an engaged model than typical. I can't get chat to show up. Oh, there we go. Cool. So I'll be paying attention to chat as well if you don't feel like coming off on the microphone. But if you have questions, like, you actually have access to a resource, so now is the best time to ask, right? Instead of scouring on Google for that one answer.
Right.
So I'll dive right in, just in the essence of time, because I have a hard stop. So
yeah, and Aaron, I'll let you know if we see anything in the chat that you missed.
Okay, cool. That sounds great. So a little bit about me. You should always establish that you're an authority in the space before you talk about it, right? Why am I here talking about blockchain? I obviously have a startup. You saw it. We've definitely rebranded a little bit since then, but it still gets the point across. We call it kind of the Uber for mentoring now. It's got a little bit of a a sexier play on it, right? So I am a software engineer. I've been a software engineer for actually like 5 years now, actually. Wow. And I kind of got into the blockchain space. I worked on blockchain technologies. I've done some fun stuff, and I'm doing some more fun stuff that you can follow along. And so I'll go over that. I also do teach AWS and software engineering here in San Diego. So the way that this is structured, we'll end up talking about what the blockchain is. I'll give you a review if you already know what it is. I won't get as in the weeds. If you came to my last workshop, I got way too in the weeds. So I'll go over that, and then I'll talk about why startups should be integrating the blockchain. It's kind of the same thing where, when we jumped to Web 2.0, people were pushing back. Well, this is Web 3.0. So I'll talk about how this is the time is now, right? And then we'll define some use cases, and I'll actually do a little demo where I show you how easy it is to make NFTs. So you'll actually see me take an NFT and an image and make it an NFT and put it on the blockchain. And so you can actually do it. It takes like 2 minutes on OpenSea. And so I'll show you how to do that.
And cool. Just to define some terms, because I've already getting some questions, NFT and what was the other one there? He said I lost that other request, but what is an NFT?
Yeah, good question. So an NFT is basically, the way that you can label it is it's an asset on the blockchain. And so the blockchain, which we'll get into here, is I'll define that in a second, but it's a permanent asset on a network, right? And when I say NFT, it stands for non-fungible token. We don't really need to define that. You can Google it. I wouldn't worry about it. Just you can say I know what it stands for, and then you'll be popular enough to, or smarter than your friends. But you can think of it as it's permanent, it's on the blockchain, and it's something that you can access and view later. And so it doesn't go away. And so
right. And
digital.
it's a trendy term. It's a trendy term. Like you said, you can impress your friends at dinner parties.
And so one of the things that a lot of people, common misconception, I guess, is Bitcoin is not the blockchain. All right. So you might say, oh, I know what Bitcoin is, or I know what cryptocurrency is. That is not, that's an application of blockchain technology. So if you've said, oh, I've heard of Bitcoin, when I say the blockchain, that is just an application of it. The blockchain itself is actually a decentralized ledger. So the way that you can think of it is, I'm going to jump ahead just to show you that graphic now, but you basically have a copy of all of the transactions that are done by everybody on the blockchain, or at least a validation that those transactions are accurate. So what I mean by that is, let's say I'm over here and I buy something, right? Well, that transaction gets pushed to the blockchain. And when we push it to the blockchain, you get a copy of that transaction and you can view that transaction, and so can everybody else. So there's a lot more to it, which I don't want to get in the weeds. One of the questions that I usually get asked if I keep it this simple is like, well, I don't want people to see my purchases. There's an anonymization piece where you can only see addresses. And so if you don't tell people your address, you can't connect it to you, right? Which is why you're hearing a lot about the SEC and the government and regulations, because they don't really know how to regulate it. So the big piece here, decentralized ledger, everybody has access to a copy of it, or at least to validate the fact that it's real, these transactions happen. And so it's data. So the blockchain, going back to here, it stores data that you can use. And so that is a simple overview, but imagine already the possibilities with that, especially if it's anonymous, which is what we're going to dive into. So let's look at it. Let's break down a transaction. So if we look at transactions, right? If I'm a computer, or I'm on a computer and I make a payment to somebody else, right? So let's say I want to send Bitcoin to someone. So we're over here in the laptops that are communicating. And so I take my transaction. Let's say I want to send you some Bitcoin. The transaction request is sent between the two parties, right? And so we are acting on the network. But what happens is, as you see here, in the purple triangle, these nodes come in and they validate that transaction. So it goes from, okay, this transaction happened on the blockchain, and then the nodes say, does that look good? And if it does look good, then they validate it. And when it gets validated, it becomes that block, right? As you can see right there, that in the middle, right in the middle of the screen, it becomes a block. And a block has a lot of things on it. Like I could get very technical and talk about like nonces and hashes, but what you want to think of it as is it has that data of your transaction. So your transaction's on this block. So you've done this transaction, you want to do a transaction. It gets validated by everybody on the network, right? All the nodes. Now the block is ready to be mined or minted, or however the way that blocks are created on the blockchain. So if you've heard of Bitcoin mining, what Bitcoin mining is when a block full of data is ready to go, people can mine, which they use computing power to do so. They solve algorithms. Essentially, the computers solve algorithms. And when they do that, they get a chance to mine a block. When they mine that block, they earn a reward for doing so. So what they're doing is, after the nodes approve it, there's obviously like nuances in this workflow, but after the nodes approve it and it moves down to the mining piece, once it gets mined, they say great, and then it gets attached to the chain. So that's why, hence the name blockchain, right? So now that transaction is attached to the end of the blockchain. You're able to go on and download that blockchain when you connect to the network, and you can look at the history. So that's why there's sites where you're able to get on and look at all of these transactions. If you look up an address, you can see all their transactions. And so there's some people on Twitter that like to pull addresses and like big whales. And a whale is just somebody who buys like a lot of crypto, and they try to figure out who that person is. So they've made a game of it. But that's the whole point. It's trustless and it can potentially be anonymous. But obviously, if you're buying something and your name's attached to your account, right? Like on Coinbase, so they can eventually get to you. So, but again, cryptocurrency tokens, that's an application of the blockchain. The blockchain itself is that decentralized ledger. All right, so that's the overview that I wanted to get through, which lets us segue into the fun stuff. NFTs. So a little bit more about NFTs. As I think Jonah mentioned, they're non-fungible, it's unique, so you can't replace it. So think of it in terms of the Mona Lisa, right? I can go and I can look at the Mona Lisa. I can go and take a picture of it, but my picture is a copy of the Mona Lisa, right? I can look at that photo and look at and say, wow, that's the Mona Lisa, it looks great. But I don't own the Mona Lisa. I don't have that unique copy. And so there's the same sort of concept with an NFT. So you cannot replicate it. It's completely unique. And so the NFT landscape right now is obviously booming. You might have heard about it and seen it in the news where they're talking about all these NFTs selling for millions of dollars. And then you go on and it's like a hamburger covered in slime or something really weird that people are paying millions of dollars for. There's a lot of things you can do with NFTs. Right now, we're seeing it applied in a very simple way. And so some of the ways that we can apply NFTs in the startup and business realm is real estate. And this is like one of my favorite concepts. If you buy a house, okay, and the house is a digital asset, you digitize it as an NFT, right? So I go and I purchase the house, and then on the blockchain, I get this digital asset saying I own the house, right? Kind of like a deed. Now, you can use a decentralized platform and then take out a loan on your house immediately at a 2 to 4% interest rate because the collateral is on the blockchain. So the process has become much simpler. And so there's actually a big push from this from Henry Elder, who is the president of the International Blockchain Real Estate Association, obviously making a push for this to happen. He basically puts it, I'm going to quote him as less brain damage. That's his direct quote. Because instead of doing all that paperwork, all that due diligence, you're just able to take out that loan on your digital asset because it now digital asset is right there for people to see, right? There's no big due diligence process. There's not a lot of paperwork. It's the future, right? That's where we're moving. And the other piece I like about this is it's unbiased. So getting into credit scores, we're going to jump to the one on the right. You can get efficient and effective verification of transactions if you have an address, right? Because it's all tracked on that digital ledger. So instead of having these credit score companies like Transamerica come and do these big calculations and struggle to manage all the data, they can just plug right into the blockchain, and they can get access to all of your transaction history, right? If they have your address. And then when you want to take out a loan or open a credit card, there's no bias associated with that because your name isn't there. You plug in your address. So we're removing the bias factor. I understand you're making basically a human become a number, but you do end up removing the bias factor in a lot of the decision-making processes, right? There's no name attached to that. So you're going to get approved based on your actual credit score, nothing else. There's no other factor, which is pretty rad. So I really like that application of it. And it also increases accuracy because you're all downloading the same exact blockchain. And then honestly, I know I've got my own startup right now, but I was toying with doing something in the health space. I just don't have the background for it. But electronic health records, so that second box here. Imagine if you were to go to the hospital, and this is kind of multiple technologies, but if you go to the hospital and you go to the ER, right? They can't treat you if they don't know your allergies. So if you're unconscious, there's nothing they can do. But if we had something, and this is definitely like a little bit out there and a little bit more advanced, but I think it's coming. But if we had something like chips, right, in our hand or wherever they want to put chips, which we'll probably have in my lifetime, we could attach that to a blockchain address, and that blockchain address could go to your record, your health record. And so that health record could be behind an authentication. So you basically have to be authorized in the doctor's office and then go and get your health record that the doctor could then update, right? So then you don't know where you're going to end up. You don't know when you're going to get in a car accident or anything like that, but they'll always have access to that. You just have to put it behind an authorization layer. So real-time access to digital records, and then they're encrypted. Those are some big buzzwords for organizations nowadays, but it's basically the way that I want you to start to think about this is shared access to data without putting yourself out there and exposing yourself, right? Remember when Web 2.0 started to take off? Maybe not, but everybody was scared of cookies. So cookies are just ways for you to track somebody on a website, but you're not actually tracking that person. What you're doing is you're taking anonymized data and saving it. So like in analytics, right? So you can get impression data and see how long somebody spends on a page. But it's all anonymized because they find the average. So instead of that just being central and having you to go to a database and there has to be servers for you to manage it, you cut out that middle layer of the servers and the people managing it, and you put it inside this shared ledger that's validated by the people who use that network. All right. And so this is just scratching the surface of what we can do. These are just NFTs, right? And obviously there's things like smart contracts. I know you guys are probably aware of tokens and cryptocurrency. And so where can you plug in? I've given you 3 industries here to kind of start to think about it. But in my very clever meme that I made, the way that you can start to begin to plug it in. Yeah, go ahead with the question.
Okay, so hi, Aaron. My name's Rhonda.
Hey.
So Scripps Healthcare had this massive breach, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if they were on the blockchain, all of our data would not have been compromised. Is that the deal? Because we have this app that we use, this
Mm-hmm.
MyScripts app, and you can communicate and blah, blah, blah. Would that all just be its own blockchain?
Yes and no. So there's a bunch of different ways you can do it. But if you're worried about a breach, right?
Yeah.
You could do something where if somebody were to plug in, you would have to have multiple validators to say this person is authorized, right?
Okay.
So this is obviously one of the ways. There's a lot of different approaches when you start to put things on the blockchain, but just off the top of my head, that's one way where you would actually have the nodes validate that this person has access instead of letting them in. And everything on the blockchain is, well, encrypted. So it's hashed. So when you put it behind a hash, even if they were to get in and get access to it, if they don't have a way to decrypt it, then they're not going to be able to do anything, right? They'll just come up. The last piece I want to point out is the biggest thing you have to be worried about there is changes. So when you're looking at, when somebody were to come in and get access and they wanted to make a change, they wouldn't be able to make a change to that network unless 51% of the network agreed. So although they might get access, because right, everybody has to validate the transaction. So they're never going to be able to edit it or delete the data or anything like that. But the Scripps network is centralized. And so the way that you want to think about it is you're moving into the decentralization space versus actual having that centralized, here's all of our data, and if you get in, you've got in, right? And I think the same thing happened to Sharp like 8 years ago, correct? Yeah, because I worked at Sharp. I worked at Sharp before this.
Cool, so, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. And so this obviously is, I was jumping into some of the NFT options, but the blockchain doesn't just stop at NFTs, right? Like I said earlier, there's tokens and things like that. But when we talk about Web 2.0 and the shift that people made to go to mobile and cloud computing, there was huge pushback there. Companies didn't want to have websites and things like that. I think this was like 20 years ago, but AOL, remember, that was a huge thing. And companies were trying to find ways, like if you've read Lean Startup, which I hope most of you guys have, at least like early in your startup careers, the founders from IMVU, right? And he created his company, and what he was trying to do is plug into a chat. And so they were trying to make 3D avatars for chat, which is now, it would probably be, if that didn't exist already, it would be a killer idea now with the COVID era on us. But what he found out is that's not what people wanted. And they just wanted to have this separate app, right, where they could go on. The same thing, you want to start to think in the same space where if companies are pushing back and they're not ready to accept this, then that means we're early. This technology isn't going anywhere. So we're going to be early adopters of the blockchain technology for the next 5 to 10 years. Like, look at how big Amazon got with cloud. And so there'll be a big start. There'll be multiple startups that pop up and take advantage of this and find unique ways to use it. Going back to the health question, there's something called Health Chain. It's actually what I do at the end of all of these. I give out a link tree, and I put it's a journal article. So it's a scholarly published journal. They did something with Health Chain, which is they made a project where they did EHRs on a blockchain. I recommend checking it out. It's a really good read. I did put that. You'll get the link after this, but And so that's just one example, right? And scientists are already starting to think about ways they can do that. And so the other piece I want to throw out there is all the data on the blockchain. If you start to share the data, right? And depending on what you want to do with the data, a lot of these companies that are coming out and they're creating their own blockchains, they're making them open source, which means they're accessible to all. We can get on and we can use them and we can build on them, and they have guides to how to build on them. But the technicality of the underlying technicality and plugging them in and the scariness of the blockchain is pushing people away. But as more and more people start to adopt it, we're going to go from early adopters to, early majority, then late majority. And then by the time you guys decide that, oh, I should be using the blockchain as a tool, it won't be unique anymore, and it'll just be the standard, right? Cloud computing is the standard. We can stand up a startup in a matter of days, right? This last weekend, I built 2 apps this last weekend. I had a hackathon, and then I'm doing a side project. And because the cloud exists, I was able to build that. Now imagine what we can do with the blockchain. And you can tell that I don't even fully understand what we'll be able to do, right? That's still how early we are. And so I can start to ramble off all these ideas. But go ahead.
Hey, Aaron. So what would be an example of a company using open source?
So open source, you can think of open source as, let's say I make a platform for you to put NFTs, right? Which I'm going to show you later. And so you could go on and you could put your own NFTs and then sell them on your own platform, right? So that whole platform, for it to plug into your platform, for you to use it, the code of it, that means it's open source. So you don't have to pay to use it. Open source also means it's contributed to by the community. So when I say these blockchains are open source, that means that these developers who love the blockchain and are advancing technology and are contributing to our growth are plugging in, and they're actually building the blockchain. So the community is growing the blockchain, which if you think about it, makes sense because they're the ones using it and validating it, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Austin says, yeah.
Sorry to send you a short story. I don't want to interrupt you too much, but no, it's definitely very interesting.
Yeah, that's really cool. And imagine all the sharing data, and there's tons of use cases, but obviously the data play is really big, but that again is just scratching the surface. And so what I like to tell people, and I said this in the last one, I'll say this again, but you don't want to be a blockchain startup if you're not comfortable with the blockchain, but you want to start to think about it as a tool, but don't force it. So before I even get into this, don't force the blockchain on any of your businesses or force your way into it. You don't need to. Right? If you don't need to use a blockchain, don't use it. If what you're doing is efficient and effective, you don't need to force it. But here's the thing, if there's ways where you can see yourself becoming more successful and your company becoming more efficient, then that's when you can start to plug the blockchain into those use cases. So I'll give you an example. My favorite example, we're going to come back to this slide, but I really want to get into the example because it's just natural flow. So let's say I have 2 people that want to work together. Okay. And so we can do something called smart contracts. All right, so smart contracts is another application of the blockchain. And so a smart contract is simply, very, very simply put, it's a program stored on a blockchain that runs when predetermined conditions are met. So the predetermined condition in this scenario, in this picture, this very advanced technological picture of stick figures, is I want to pay somebody to do something, or in this case, they're paying for data. Okay. So the smart contract, kind of like escrow, right? The user, we'll call it Mr. Green on the left and Miss Blue on the right, right? So Mr. Green pays and it goes, the smart contract says, okay, I've got the money. Until the data sent over, Mr. Green is not going to get, or Miss Blue is not going to get the money, right? So it almost holds it in escrow. And so that smart contract can be executed as the data being sent over once the money is received. Okay. So very simple smart contract. Okay. Here's the thing. Here's why I want to jump to this slide. So let's think about how we can use smart contracts to save a company money, right? Because so far that seems a little bit more of a burden. Why not just have it be an automatic, like money received, it goes out. All right. That would be easier. So let's say Mr. Green pays. Okay. And it's been about 50 days and he still hasn't received the whatever data he's trying to get. Let's say it's an NFT or digital art, anything, it doesn't matter. So the smart contract is sitting there holding his funds. And what they agreed upon was a 30-day turnaround. He pays, he gets it in 30 days. It's been 50. So now he has been back and forth. She says she's going to get it. She doesn't get it to him. So he wants to file a dispute. She doesn't agree to just give up the contract, right? So the money's still just sitting there. He wants to do a dispute on the transaction. So when Mr. Green wants to dispute that transaction, what you can do is you can have unbiased third parties come in as jurors. And so the way it works is they can look at the smart contract, they can look at the evidence on both sides, right? And they can take a percentage of the payment Mr. Green has paid, let's say 20% of his payment, to decide who is in the right, okay? And so this is a definitely more advanced model because usually they have some incentive, right? You can do bounties, like with tokens that you can earn bounties. But in this case, you're staking a percentage of what you've paid to have somebody come in and completely unbiased and make the decision for you, all right? There are better ways to do it in the future that companies will be able to issue maybe tokens to people that come in so that Mr. Green doesn't have to give up a percentage of his contract. But in the end, you're not the one providing the customer support, right? You'll still have that customer support team. You should always have a customer support team, but it's going to be much smaller. And so then you can build up ecosystems and communities, which for companies is absolutely great because then you're able to create these like heroes for your organization that love to go on, like mods, right? On a subreddit or a Discord, like moderators who work for free and they maintain all these environments and these communities for you. But now you can have them on your platform doing things like customer support for you, and they're earning for doing that. All right. This is one example of how you can plug in the technology. And so this is my absolute favorite example. I hope we're able to do this, but it's definitely more advanced. All right, so coming back to this, that's a use case where any company can, in theory, depending on how much it would cost for them to plug in a blockchain, as costs go down, because blockchain costs will eventually go down, this is something that you could potentially do. But here's an example of a difference between a blockchain startup and a blockchain as a tool. So Chainalysis, and I picked one that's very obvious, it has chain in the name. What they do is they investigate, track, and monitor blockchain activity. So they try to find hacked or stolen funds, okay? Because imagine when you have a wallet with cryptocurrency or tokens in it or NFTs, you have ways to back it up, right? Usually it's 12 to 20 words. You have some backups of it. If those get stolen, then your wallet can get stolen, just like your personal wallet, your physical wallet can get stolen, right? If you leave it out. So you're never really supposed to, they say not to keep your keys or, well, to take care of your keys, but not to keep that, I can't remember what it's called, but those 12 to 20 words anywhere on a device, right? Because it can get stolen. So Chainalysis helps you figure out who stole it and identifies bad actors on a blockchain network. So there can be bad actors, but as I said earlier, we're protected by that 51% rule. So if somebody wants to act maliciously on a network and they want to overthrow the network, they need 50% of the network to do that. All right, so it's very, very unfeasible. Okay. And so Chainalysis is definitely a blockchain startup. Their entire premise is based on the blockchain. They only exist because the blockchain exists. Examples of companies that are using it as a tool are Republic. So Republic actually uses a blockchain. You can invest in highly vetted startups, but they also have some tokenization on the back end. And what tokenization is, and I think they might not be doing it right now because they're playing against the SEC, but if I wanted to invest, this was really big in 2018, but you could invest in startups with tokens that they would launch instead of actual equity. And you can't do that as much anymore. There's a lot of regulations on it, but if you're an accredited investor, you still can invest in tokens, but now there's just no point. When people were doing that before, you could invest as just a regular person, not an accredited investor, right? And so they had to fix that because people were getting scammed, but Republic still uses it. Another example is a company called SoRare. And SoRare is very interesting because they actually have nothing about the blockchain on their front page. What you do on SoRare is you get digital cards of soccer players and you play fantasy with them. So like fantasy sports, but you wouldn't realize they're on the blockchain unless you read their terms and conditions. They used to, on their front page, say NFT like crazy. It used to be all over the front page. They rebranded because of exactly why I'm bringing this up. If you start to talk about the blockchain, we play tested this a lot at Pedestal, we use the blockchain. You become a blockchain startup right now, unless you're talking to the right people. So you want to be very careful if you do decide to use the blockchain, make sure you're talking to the right people as you're getting investors or marketing. And there's obviously some legal nuances there, but.
And I can, if I can interject something right here, I can say this is so true. And I didn't realize what a huge impact it had until I got to see it with my own eyes. You told me that's the very same thing. And I thought, yeah, sure. Until I started to see, and you are so true. The second that blockchain came out of your mouth, it was like a switch that turned on in people's minds, and it changed everyone's, the way that they saw you and saw your startup. So yeah, I can say I've seen it with my own eyes, and I think that's a good way to use it without putting it out there in the forefront.
Yeah, no, she's right. And that was actually here at the rec. We had the first time that I think Tanya's talking about, we ended up pitching our startups very quickly. And then we asked them to pitch it back to us. And I got billed as a blockchain startup the second I said blockchain. That's all that people picked out. It's a buzzword right now too, as well. So, but when you have a blockchain as a tool, keep the roadmap simple, get the MVP ready, the same stuff you would do. And then if it's expensive or hard to integrate, I mean, you can always chat with me. I put my Calendly and like all my LinkedIn everywhere. I take almost every single meeting I can. But the service should be able to exist without the blockchain, right? That's the difference, right? Like Pedestal can exist without the blockchain, but the blockchain makes us better. Okay, is the way that we're billing it. So it makes us much better, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we don't mention the blockchain in our pitch, is the moral of the story. So before I get into the different types of like the technical stuff, I did say I wanted to do a demo, and I think I do want to do that now. So we talked a lot about NFTs. And so this is OpenSea, all right? You guys are actually the first to see this. This is going to be part of our marketing campaign. We're going to do some stuff with NFTs, but I've got this NFT on the blockchain right now, okay? So this is hosted and I own it, right? So I created it, it says I created it. But NFTs can have things like properties, okay? They can be part of collections. But the big thing here is that this NFT has an address and a token ID, right? Meaning I can go up and I can look at this, all right? I can look and see that this exists. It tells me which blockchain it's on. So Polygon is a blockchain. They're really good blockchain for NFTs. And this has data associated with this image. So the image itself is data, but then you can put other data on there, all right? And so you can do cool stuff with this. Oh, question, I think somebody's hands up. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yep. Hey, what's going on, Aaron? Jeff Motter here. I wanted to ask you quickly, when you were making your NFT, was there any particular token or platform that you chose to mimic? Let's say like you said, Polygon, or let's say Ravencoin. Do you have any specific I guess priority to what platform or what code you want your NFT to run through, as opposed to writing the whole code?
Yeah, that's a preference question. I'm going to show you how to do it on OpenSea, and you can actually choose between a couple. So you can actually, after this, you'll know how to do it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so I recommend that when you're considering which platform you want to use and which blockchain, think about things like fees, and think about how you want users to, what you want them to do with it. And so like with Polygon, for example, it's a really good blockchain for just hosting NFTs. Same with obviously like Ethereum, like you can do stuff on Ethereum, and Solana has NFTs, but it's basically preference. I did it on OpenSea, where I was just able to upload an image and I could choose the blockchain. And now I have a Polygon wallet. I can transfer this over to my Polygon wallet very, very easily. And so it's quick, it's effortless and efficient. So yeah, it's just personal preference essentially. And you want to be consistent. So if you're going to plug them into, if you want to create a collection, I recommend just doing it very manually the first time. So like go through on OpenSea and just create it, like upload your image, and which I'll talk through here. And then see how that process goes and the properties and attributes you can put on it, and then you can figure out how to code it later. I recommend heavily against investing time, money, and energy into setting up like a minting process and coding it all out so that it's automatic.
Agreed.
Cool. Okay. So, but yeah, like I said, this is, you guys are seeing part of our upcoming marketing campaign. We're going to do something with this with launch, and we're assigning rarities to it, right? And so this is season 0, like we're going to do seasons, and we're going to assign stats that are randomly generated. And so, and we'll also make these images, we're going to make them, we have 10 images we're going to use, and they're all going to be rare. And so when you opt into our beta, you're going to get an NFT that only you can get in beta, right? And then, so when you talk about NFTs, here's the other piece from the legal side. When you talk about NFTs and anything on the blockchain as a startup, don't ever say that unless you are going to make it an investment tool, don't ever say it's an investment token or talk about it increasing in value ever. Then you fail what's called the Howey test, and then the SEC can shut you down. So do your research. If you're going to use the blockchain and tokens and assets and you want to sell them and make money off of them, talk to a blockchain lawyer. Okay, so all this stuff I'm saying, don't hold me accountable. This isn't legal advice, all of that. So, all right, cool. So let me show you how easy it is to create them. So you make an account on OpenSea, so OpenSea.io, which I can share right in chat. And if you want, you can, what is the plan to offset the carbon footprint? I love that question. So actually, look at this. Look, this is my next slide. So I'll get to that. All right, so I am going to talk about that. Okay, because I agree. Because yeah, with blockchain, with Bitcoin rather, the whole computing thing and Tesla, we'll talk about all that. So when I log on here, you can just create, right? And when I click on create, it has you sign into a wallet. So you do have to have a wallet. I use MetaMask. Okay, it's super easy to set up. You can get it as a browser extension, right? And when I click on it, it shows me my wallet, and I actually have to log in with my password, and then I'm in, right? And so when I clicked on create, it asked me, hey, validate that this is you trying to log in. It gives you a message, so you can actually see it's giving you data, and you're digitally signing. So I'm digitally signing, saying, yep, this is me. Here's my wallet. Go ahead and log in. Now it's as easy as up, dragging and dropping. I can add, so I can add like a head that I have here. Great, look, there's the head. We don't have a name for the guy yet. We're calling him Patty. We're gonna let the community name him. And I can say, you know, Patty's head, and we can actually give it an external link. So when they click on it, they can learn more about it. So you can add all this data to this NFT, where if people are looking at it, they can see, oh, it has traits, it has attributes. So we can give it a description, and we'll say, you know, Patty's head is large, and then we plug it into our collection. So Patty's Adventures is what we're calling this right now, just for the demo. And you can give it all these properties, levels, stats, unlockable content, right? So all of these things can be added to just this digital asset. So when I talked about digital assets earlier, I've refrained from calling them art. In ways, they are art, right? You can have art on the blockchain, but I'm just showing you that there's more data to each of these NFTs than you might have originally thought. And you can get you to start thinking about what else you can do with the NFT, right? Which is what I'm trying to get you guys to do, where I talked about electronic health records. I talked about real estate, right? This is obviously the most simplest form of an NFT. At the bottom, you can choose the supply, but it doesn't cost gas. And so gas is fees. And so Ethereum has relatively high fees to other networks. So if you hear people that say they don't like Ethereum, it's because most often it has to do with the fees. And so I can choose the blockchain. I'm going to choose Polygon. It's a gas-free blockchain, right? So I'm going to choose Polygon. Because of that, I can do more than one copy. And so I can make 10 copies of these, or 40, however many people are here, and I can give them out to everybody, right? And so think about even going to events. You get that digital collectible. Everything is online now. You can't go to these conferences and get these digital handbags. But what if you get digital collectibles that have info or that have rarity associated with them? And then you get to show them off. And so there'll be sites that are going to pop off that let you show them off, just like LinkedIn. You know, you can show off your certifications, things like that.
I was just gonna ask about that. Like, do you foresee these being like digital badges eventually?
Yeah, we're doing that. Yeah. And so we are, and there'll be more sites that do that. They're going to, because you're not limited to just the one platform when you digitize anything. Yeah. That's the biggest thing about the blockchain. Like if I were to do it prior to the blockchain, the badge is specific to my site, my website, my web app. But when it's on the blockchain, I can show off that badge anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So I can go out and I can put it on any website I want and say, come look at what I've done, what I've earned. And so I think things like resumes and things like that and education, all that stuff is going to get some sort of blockchain play, but we'll see how that pans out. So, and how long it takes to get adopted.
I'm gonna build some. I think it's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, but then once you click create, you're good to go. It gets created. It tells you created. You can go ahead and share it, of course. And now I have this head on the blockchain. Since it was minted, so it doesn't come from anywhere. But if I were to trade it or sell it, then we'd be able to have all this history that showcases all of the transactions and who did it, who sold it. And I could go and I could click on the address, right? And so if I click on, this contract address, it comes over here and it brings up something that we won't dive into too much, but you can look at the addresses, and this is where all these are NFTs being created, all of these on OpenSea. So, and it goes on, and this is the actual token ID. So if you want to look up this exact token, you could find that, and that's the address there. So it's that simple to create NFTs. So if you want to get on and create your own, I fully support it. So we'll jump back into sustainability because that's my favorite thing to chat about, actually. So sustainability, we talked a lot about the blockchain. We talked a little bit about mining, but mining right now, when you hear mining, that is the only way that many of you, I would imagine, and I hope I'm not generalizing here, would think that cryptocurrencies and tokens can be created. That is just the most popular way right now. Actually, maybe not. It might be proof of stake now, but it's not very friendly and it's not very efficient. I looked into mining and I did all of the math. It's not even worth it for the amount of electricity. And so it's not sustainable. It's not green, right? You build these big facilities that are just have tons of computers in them. Like how is that effective and green? So there's other ways you can actually create tokens and cryptocurrency. Other than mining, you can do proof of stake, which proof of stake is people who hold the token validate the transaction. So the more you hold, the more validations you do. Because remember, to earn on a blockchain, most blockchains, you have to validate transactions, right? And so proof of stake is saying, I own a lot of this, I'm going to validate this, but it's still the community is validating it, right? So that's the simplest way of putting it. Then there's proof of contribution, where actions on the blockchain contribute to the network and enable users to generate the token. So I don't talk about it often, but we're doing proof of contribution at Pedestal, where you're contributing to the ecosystem. And so we're not even going to end up owning the token, right? Because we're not contributing to the ecosystem. So it's the people who are contributing to that ecosystem are the ones who are validating the transactions in the ecosystem, and actually you get tokens for doing that. Then there's proof of capacity, which is like hard drives. So the more hard drive space you have, again, not super green, but at least a little bit in the right direction. That one is not hopefully going to take off, fingers crossed. There's a very, very cool one. There's proof of selection. This is incredibly high tech. I struggled to get my head around it. So if anybody else can and can explain it to me better, please, but check it out. It basically, you take all the active users on a network and it validates them, and they select the next block, and it takes people off that are inactive for the network. It's this big algorithm that's when you're active on the network, you're validating the network. If you're inactive, you're a dead node, right? It's super duper technical. But however, it's very, very green, right? Because of that. And then there's proof of gaming, which is pretty self-explanatory. But there's so many more, and there's so many different ways to do it. So the big push here is to move away from mining. So sustainability is going to be implemented, and it is. It just sucks that we started with mining. It really does. And like I said, we do use a modified proof of contribution, which is super green and requires no computing power, right? Once we set up our blockchain, and we're going to end up probably building on a blockchain, so which means we're going to end up using a blockchain that we have access to the code, and we don't have to create the whole blockchain ourselves. We can take advantage of that decentralized ledger technology. Once we build on a blockchain, we're going to set it up so that's proof of contribution. So part of our phase 3 initiative, validate the idea first. All right, and then that's it. So I usually leave right around this much time for questions in case this is definitely a little bit more quieter than last time, so I probably overshot it with the time. I'll share my link tree, so you can see the old workshop. I think I linked to it there. Some of the things that I like to talk about were Health Chain Journal, which is this article that I mentioned earlier. Check it out, it blew my mind. Question, I see a question.
Hi, Erin. My name is Satari. I know that you said that you aren't super well versed in certain things, but you do sound like you're very knowledgeable and definitely know more than I do. And I was wondering if you could, if they're not already on your link tree, if you could maybe recommend some areas to start for those of us that aren't as familiar, where we could start reading more about it, and just good resources for that.
Yeah, depending on how technical you want to get, you should read the Bitcoin Standard, which is a really good book. Let me make sure that's the name. Yep, right here. So I recommend this. So the Bitcoin Standard, Decentralized Alternative to Central Banking. It talks a lot about DeFi. A lot of the things you're going to end up reading are going to talk about DeFi. So they're going to get more into decentralized finance than anything else, because that was the first application of the blockchain, right? We're using it for that. If you want to dive into the coding side, there's courses on Udemy. There's quite a few. Just do the ones that have the higher reviews. And if you want to, yeah, I can drop in the book link in chat. And then the Udemy ones I can drop in as well. I linked to a video in the link tree, and I recommend you watch it if you really do want to dive in. It's Vitalik Buterin, who invented Ethereum. It's right here. He talks about crypto economics. So that'll help you understand a lot about the blockchain, but very quickly. And it's crypto economics, which is different than blockchain, right? He's actually talking about cryptocurrency. If you can get your head around that, then you're leaps and bounds ahead of most. It is a little bit technical, but he does his best. He's just a genius. And so when he thinks he's dumbing it down, he's so smart that he's not, right? It's not understandable. And then I would check out, what's something else I would check out? That's probably about it. You can do some digging on Medium if you find a good writer on Medium that you like, that gets into it, the basics. But the basics you're going to find from a course on Udemy a little bit better, where it talks about things like a nonce, number only once, which is basically how blocks are made, and cryptography and hashing, which are concepts that you definitely want to know if you're going to start coding. But everything else you can find in that first book I gave you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And I appreciate what you said about making sure that you don't end up being seen as a blockchain startup if that's not what your main purpose is, because I'm in Tanya's class and we did have an idea of potentially utilizing blockchain technology for one of our services that we would be offering. So that helps a lot. So thanks so much.
Do you mind sharing what it was? You don't have to. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'd love to.
Yeah, no, I was actually, when you mentioned that you had a Calendly open, I was like, I'm definitely booking something with you to talk more about it. But just briefly, what we wanted to do originally was a sports management agency where players, specifically for collegiate athletes, because of the new legislation that passed allowing them to make money and profit off their likeness as an athlete, we were going to make this to where they could either represent themselves or find vetted representation for them. And then it came up financial literacy and how important that is. And if we could incorporate a way to help these players, since I believe we read a statistic that said 80% of NFL players go broke after 3 years. We wanted to help that statistic be mitigated and better that. And so we were thinking of maybe a mutual fund where players could contribute any denomination of money, and that would be managed by a team of financial advisors, and that would maybe operate on blockchain to keep it secure. I'm not super well versed in it, so I apologize. That was not okay. Our pinch, or very lengthy, but yeah.
No, I know I put you on the spot. So with that, you get into, as I said earlier, it's a good talking point a little bit. When you want to start to integrate anything with finance in the blockchain, you always want to, again, make sure you're talking to a good lawyer. There's a lot of lawyers that are coming out and they're young and they might not do their due diligence a little well. So talk to a good lawyer, because you have to watch the SEC. Because if you do things with tokens on the blockchain and it falls under a certain category, it's actually an investment tool. And so it can't be an investment tool because you don't know if everybody's accredited and things like that, unless your targeted audience are all accredited investors and you're validating that they're accredited investors, right? The same sort of deal that you do when you do a startup, right? And you raise money and you want to get targeted accredited investors. So you just have to be careful with that. It's a cool idea. There's a couple of funds out there that are doing something like that. There's actually one that invests in startups called Seedify. And so what Seedify does is it lets the community choose who they're going to invest in, and then they all invest together. And then they support them in an incubator-like fashion. So Seedify is actually an incubator. And so the community continues to support them throughout, and then they can reinvest. It's really cool. And so that might be a good jumping off point for you to kind of learn about that. I would look into seedify.fund.
Awesome. I definitely will. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. Cool. Any other questions? Cool. Okay, well, you guys can check us out. And we'd love to have you. We're going to launch, as I said earlier, you guys are the first to hear that we're going to give away an NFT. So you can get an NFT. You saw how easy they are to make. So now you're kind of, you know, my secret. But they do have different rarities. And so, again, don't ever say they're going to get value, right? So if that's what you get out of this, 2 things hopefully you get out of this. Be careful what you say about the blockchain if you're going to use it in your startup. And the blockchain is the decentralized ledger. And there you go.
Got it.
Those are great pieces of advice there. I just wanted to let everybody know too, if you want to grab the chat, because there's so many good links in the chat, I'd recommend that you go to the chat and you can actually copy the all of the information there in the chat by clicking on those 3 little dots at the bottom. It says save chat. Save it right to your desktop and you can access later. Or I might also put some of these links into the recording. I think I'll do that. I'll put the links in the recording as well, including the link to our the book recommendations from all of the different speakers at the rec. I love it whenever I get these books, and I'm more now that I'm looking forward to reading that I put in there just now. So we're almost out of time, but I definitely want to make sure that if anybody has any burning questions, that they get a chance to ask them right now. All right, then Aaron, would you like to take us out?
Yeah, Benjamin, did you have a question? I saw you come off camera a couple times.
Oh, no. Thanks so much, Aaron. I really appreciate it. It's good.
Yeah, no worries. All right, guys. Well, hopefully that helps. Like I said, feel free to book some time with me if you have questions about crypto or blockchain or anything like that. This is always fun. Thanks for having me, and I'll see you at the next one.
Yay, thanks so much. Bye, everyone. Take care. See you at the next one.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.